Have you ever been propositioned in a way that made the ground beneath your beliefs shake? I was sitting in a Tehran tea house, sipping cardamom-laced chai when it happened. Four women, barely in their 20s, sat across from me like a mirage. One of them leaned in and asked, "Would you marry all of us?" I laughed, nervously. Thought it was a joke. But there was no humor in their eyes. Only desperation. Oh, and something even more disarming, affection. What began as an innocent cultural exchange soon turned into a moral storm I never expected to survive. My name is Marcus Daniels. I'm 50 years old, a retired architect from New Hampshire. Divorced. No kids. I always imagined that when I finally quit the 9-to-5 I'd travel. I didn't expect to fall into something that would shake the foundations of who I believed I was. Tehran wasn't originally on my list. But a fellow traveler at a hostel in Istanbul told me, "If you want to see real hospitality, go to Iran." So I booked a last-minute flight. What I found was a country wrapped in contradictions. Ancient beauty beside modern tension, warmth amid silence, and eyes that told more stories than mouths were allowed to. It was in that tea house near Ferdowsi Square that I met them. Four women, Laleh, Yasmin, Roya, and Shiren. They were students, English majors, with an affection for American jazz and a curiosity about the world that felt too big for the walls surrounding them. I met them through an older gentleman, Reza, who ran informal language groups for local students. I was invited as a guest. They sat around the table, laughing, asking questions about my life, my travels, my marriage. I told them about my ex-wife of 12 years, and how we grew apart after my second layoff. Roya asked, "Is it true Americans can marry for love, divorce for no reason?" I nodded, not realizing how much weight that nod carried. Later, Reza invited me for dinner. I returned again and again, until it became routine. Somehow, I became part of their group, an unlikely guest star in their lives. I wasn't just the American tourist anymore. I was Marcus, the confidant, the one they could ask anything. But nothing prepared me for the moment they asked the one thing that unraveled me completely. Started subtly. Shiren began texting me more often. Laleh would sit beside me a little too close. Roya once brought me a scarf, saying the pattern reminded her of my wise eyes. Yasmin, the boldest of them, began calling me Mr. Husband with a teasing smile. I thought it was harmless, even flattering. Lonely old man, attention from young women. It happens. Right. One night after dinner, as the city's call to prayer faded into the evening air, we sat on the rooftop of Reza's building, watching the stars. The conversation drifted from politics to poetry to dreams. They asked me what I wanted from life now. I said, peace. Maybe a second chance. Shiren whispered, "We could give you that." The others giggled, but it wasn't mocking. It was nervous, hopeful. I blinked. "What do you mean?" Laleh, eyes locked on mine, said, "You could marry us. All of us." I laughed, but my voice cracked. "You're joking, right?" "No," Roya said, her voice low. "You don't understand. In Iran our choices are few. Our futures are already decided. Marry someone our parents choose, live a life we don't want. But with you, you're kind. You listen," Yasmin added. "You don't treat us like property. And it's not illegal," Shiren said quickly. "Polygamy is allowed here. You would save us." Save them. That word burned into my brain. I stood up, pacing. "You don't know me. I'm nobody. I'm broke, I'm old, I've failed at love before." "But you're honest," Laleh interrupted. "That's more than most men here." The more I pushed back, the more convincing they became. They weren't desperate in the way I feared. They were brilliant, passionate women grasping for agency in a system that clipped their wings before they could fly. And the worst part of me felt drawn in. I started imagining it. Mornings filled with laughter, learning, music, debates about literature over lentil soup. It was intoxicating, this idea of being needed, chosen not out of obligation but out of defiance. I started writing letters to, and I never sent. I asked myself if it was possible to start again with four women who saw me as a doorway to freedom. But I also saw the cracks, how each of them looked at me differently, how affection shaded into competition, how Shiren frowned when I complimented Roya's poem, how Lale stopped showing up as often. Was I saving them? Or was I about to destroy them? It all came to a head one rainy evening. We were gathered again. Tea, music, and silence thicker than usual. Shiren wasn't there. Yasmin barely spoke. Roya looked pale. Only Lale seemed steady. "Where's Shiren?" asked. "She's gone," Lale said, her voice flat. "Gone. She left Tehran. Her uncle found out about us. He beat her. She's being sent to Shiraz." Froze. The words felt like ice slicing through the air. "Because of me." "No. Because of Hope," Yasmin said bitterly. "Because she dared to want something else." I couldn't breathe. This wasn't a fantasy anymore. This wasn't charming or romantic. It was dangerous. "I can't do this," I said, standing. "We knew you'd say that," Roya whispered. "I thought I could help. I thought." "You thought you were the hero," Yasmin snapped. I looked at them, so young yet burdened with centuries of rules. I was an intruder. A catalyst they clung to not for love, but for escape. And in doing so, I had turned their bond into a quiet war. One had already fallen. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm not who you think I am. And I can't be who you need me to be." There were tears, silence, and finally Lale stepped forward. "You gave us something no man ever did, Marcus," she said. "You listened. That's enough." That night I packed my bag. I left the scarf Roya gave me folded on the table. I left behind the poems, the tea rituals, the rooftop stargazing. But I took something else with me, the ache of truth. I never returned to Tehran. Back in New Hampshire, I resumed a quieter life. I opened a small art studio downtown. I started journaling every day. And every once in a while, I receive a cryptic email from Roya or Yasmin, coded in metaphor, poetry, song lyrics. I never respond. I don't know if I should. But I keep every message. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I said yes. If I had taken their hands, married all four, given them an illusion of freedom at the cost of my conscience. Would they be happier? Or would I have imprisoned them in another kind of lie? The truth is, love isn't always the answer. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. I think about Shiren the most. Her eyes held fire. Maybe she escaped. Maybe she found someone who saw her not as a risk, but as a revolution. And me. I learned that being wanted doesn't always mean you belong. I learned that good intentions can still ruin lives. And I learned painfully that you can't fix broken wings by holding them tighter. So when people ask me about Tehran, I smile and say it changed me. But I never tell them how. Because some stories don't belong in conversation. They belong in the silence between sips of tea, in the space where four young women once dreamed of freedom, and asked a broken man to carry the weight of their wings.